Today's Key Ministry presentation is on autism and the church. Culture. Culture refers to the particular characteristics of a group of people. Cultural norms affect the ways that people think, dress, talk, spend their leisure time, and other fundamental aspects of human behavior. So, what are some of the ways that you think, talk, dress, or act based on the cultural norms of your community of faith, of your denomination, of your faith in general? Our Christian culture should influence how we view people with autism and their inclusion into our community of faith. We talked about the characteristics of the Christian culture that should make it a place of inclusion for people with autism in part 1 of Autism and the Church. Autism as a culture. Autism isn't truly a culture. It's a developmental disability that's caused by neurological dysfunction. However, this dysfunction affects the ways that individuals with autism think, talk, eat, spend their leisure time, and understand their world. Thus, in a sense, autism does function as a culture in that it yields characteristics and patterns of behaviors in individuals with this condition. If we want to include people with autism in our communities of faith, it's important then to gain some understanding about the culture of autism. The term cross-cultural interpreter is becoming more prevalent in our society as more and more people are needed to help those from differing cultures live and work collaboratively with one another, to understand one another, and to become a community with one another. So the role of a special needs ministry for a person with autism is like that of a cross-cultural interpreter. We need people who understand both cultures and are able to translate the customs of the non-autistic environment to the person with autism. In effect, what we attempt to do for people with autism in a special needs ministry is what we ourselves might wish for when we travel to a foreign country. While you might try to learn some of the foreign language, you would also be very glad to have a guide who could help you through the different processes of that culture, such as buying a bus ticket or ordering a meal. You would appreciate a cross-cultural interpreter. So to help develop spiritual growth in a person with autism, it's important to understand their culture and the strengths and the challenges that are associated with it so that you can learn to support them in learning about your culture, the Christian culture. Let's talk about some of the learning challenges associated with the characteristics of the culture of autism. One of those is an excessive focus on details. People with autism are often very good at noticing minute details, particularly visual details. Now, the technical term for this concept is called stimulus over-selectivity. But what this concept means is that a person might focus so much on one particular detail or concept that they miss the bigger picture. It's kind of like having a mental tunnel vision. For example, during the video part of your lesson, a person with autism might be so focused on something in the background of the video that he or she totally misses what the video segment was about. Or another example might be that they're so focused on a particular word on a page that they neglect its meaning within the context of the sentence. So what are some implications for teaching? Well, take a hard look at your Sunday school curriculum. Basically, you have 3 choices. You can keep it like it is, you can simplify it, or you can seek an alternative curriculum. Before considering an alternative curriculum for your special needs learners, I'd consider simplifying the curriculum that you already have. Learners use the same materials as everybody else, but perhaps you break down the activities into smaller steps, or minimize the number of steps that are required. You could consider altering the amount of time that's required to participate. You could simplify the objectives, or emphasize fewer concepts rather than the entire scope of the curriculum. Implementing some of these steps will go a long ways towards helping the person with autism stay focused on the important details of what it is that you're trying to teach. Another learning challenge associated with the culture of autism is distractibility. It can be very difficult for people with autism to pay attention because of their need to focus on something else. People with autism can be distracted by both internal feelings and external things, such as sights and sounds and textures. So what are the teaching implications? Well, there's a couple of strategies that you could use here. One of them that autism-related research reveals is to use teaching materials that have a high degree of interest for the learner. You know, I often say that people with autism are more like you and I than different. And here's a good case in point. I pay a lot more attention to something that I'm interested in than I do when I'm not interested. So does the person with autism. So find or develop materials or activities in conjunction with your curriculum that your learner likes, and he'll be a lot less distracted. Another strategy to improve attention and decrease distractibility is what's known as a sensory diet. Now, there's too much information to cover in this time frame about a sensory diet, but Google it if you want to learn more, or come back later because I intend on doing a future episode on this particular strategy. Another learning characteristic associated with the culture of autism is concrete thinking. People on the autism spectrum tend to be very good concrete thinkers, but for that reason, they can have difficulty with abstract language concepts. Regardless of their cognitive level, people with autism have a relatively greater difficulty with abstract language concepts. In the culture of autism, then, words typically mean one thing. They don't have connotations. So what are the teaching implications for this? Well, you want to use as much straightforward facts and language as possible. Try to stay away from jargon, simplify your language, and use practical examples to help the words make sense. In addition, you can think about using semantic maps, Venn diagrams, and brainstorming charts to help visually depict more abstract sounding concepts, especially like the ones that we use in church, such as resurrection and conversion and a host of other theological concepts. Another learning challenge associated with the culture of autism is in organizing and sequencing. People on the spectrum in general can have difficulty integrating multiple pieces of information. The term often used is executive functioning. And executive functioning is a term to describe a set of mental processes that help us to bring different pieces of information together, organize them, and now use that organized information to act on our environment. This process manifests itself in our ability to plan a project, finish work on time, multitasking or focusing on several things at one time. So what are the teaching implications? Well, here are a few research-based strategies that can be used in a community of faith to minimize the organizing and sequencing difficulties. You can use a visual schedule. Consider creating to-do lists or use checklists to identify what materials may be needed. And then break down tasks into smaller, more clearly identifiable steps, such as teaching the order of a worship service, one component or one step at a time, and then moving on to the next step once the first one's learned. Also consider using video modeling as a tool to teach church-related sequences. And the advantage of video modeling is you can send that video home and your learner can watch that in the convenience of their home to learn better the aspects of your community of faith. A final characteristic of the culture of autism that I would like to talk about today is generalizing. And by that I mean a difficulty transferring skills and behaviors across places and or people. People on the autism spectrum often learn skills or behaviors in one situation, but can have a great difficulty generalizing those skills or behaviors to other situations. And this is often tied into something we talked about previously, which is an excessive focus on details, an inability to see the big picture. And so I have this tunnel vision that this particular skill is used here and no place else, or a tunnel vision in the sense this particular skill is something I use with you, but I don't use it with another person. So some examples would be performing a skill at home, but not performing it at church, following a rule for one person, but not for another person, or following a rule in one particular location, but not another location. Being able to use a set of materials here, but not the same set of materials elsewhere, or a similar set of materials elsewhere. And so the teaching implications for that is we need to find out what the skills are that the child on the autism spectrum has, and ensure that those skills are skills that they're also able to perform at church. And as we teach new skills at church, we want to make sure that those skills can be utilized in a variety of church settings, that the rule I learn to follow in the Sunday school classroom is also the same rule that I'm able to follow at youth group, and examples like that. Key Ministry builds bridges to help connect churches with families of children with hidden disabilities. If you have any other questions about today's topic or related topics, go to our website, www.KeyMinistry.org, and send us an email or give us a call at 440-708-4488.